Well, hello again. Here's one of my yes or no questions. This one is: was Henry VIII a good king? Well, as I looked into this, I was quite interested to see what strong views there were on both sides of this question. And of course, you might well ask, what do I mean by a good king? Well, I leave that to those who argue the point either way. I think depending on your place in the community and your point of view toward the world in general, you probably have differing views on what constitutes a good king. I certainly have mine, and I'll share that with you at the end of the video in the my take section. Well, let's start out with those who say Henry VIII was a good king. First of all, there's no denying that he was a commanding presence, both physically and in his demeanor and just mere presence in any kind of a group. He was a giant of a man, and as such, that represented strength in leadership, something that I think most countries crave. So that was a good thing. Secondly, Henry was a cultured, well-read, educated, intellectual individual. He inculcated those values in his children. He saw to it that his three children were very well educated. He himself was able to read and write in Latin and English and in French. He was musical. He composed, not green sleeves as is often thought, but one or two other noteworthy pieces. Number three, he strengthened the monarchy and the overall stature of the country after really many years of civil strife, the Wars of the Roses, and so forth. He consolidated his father's success in bringing together the warring groups and made it his. It was a nation. It was not a divided nation. There were certainly differences, especially religious ones, but it was not a nation divided along tribal lines as it had been before. Next, he created the Navy. He learned a lot from his forebears and also from looking around him to see what was being used as weaponry and so forth on the continent. He learned from that. His creation, in particular, of the Navy, he didn't do much with the Army and had only limited success. But with the Navy, despite the disaster of the sinking of the Mary Rose, his flagship, before his very eyes, he did set the Navy up to be preeminent in the world, and he certainly teed up the empire itself. So we have that to thank him for. And finally, he created the Church of England. Now, of course, it was a convenience to him not to pay allegiance any longer to the Pope, but he did create an enterprise, an institution which has lasted well through the centuries, and it was in the face of a clearly, admittedly, corrupt regime in Rome. So in that sense, he gave the people something better for them to follow as worshippers and so forth. Of course, there was a great deal of dissension between Protestants and Catholics over the years, but he was the one who got it going in the right direction from the standpoint of the Protestants. Okay, well, that makes a pretty good case for Henry as a good king. But who is going to tell us about what made him a bad king? Well, there are some pretty strong arguments on this side as well. Number one, he was extravagant in particularly looking after himself and his court and his palaces and so forth to an extreme degree. He virtually bankrupted the country. He spent down all of the reserves that his father had built up, and he even managed to go through the money that he received from the abolition and so forth of the monasteries. So in that sense, he really, I won't say impoverished the nation, but he certainly made it a poorer place and made it less able to finance its continuing military adventures on the continent. Number two, he was not what you would call a moral leader. He was a self-serving, nasty man. He was violent. He was rejected wives almost as fast as he gained them. Not really a leader for the nation in the moral sense. He gave them a very bad example, and really, in many respects, left a kind of a bad taste in people's mouths. Next, of course, it's necessary for every reigning monarch to have a male heir. Females are okay, but males are what we really want. And the excesses to which he went to provide the nation with a male heir and really to continue the Tudor dynasty reached almost ridiculous proportions. It certainly led to his killing 2 wives and divorcing 2 others. And also one dying in childbirth trying to produce one for him. So that was a pretty unpleasant business. And finally, what are we to make of his bodily collapse into grotesque obesity in old age? It is said by some that he weighed as much as 400 pounds at the end of his life. That really reflects a life dedicated to self-indulgence and entitlement to a grotesque degree. It's a very unpleasant way for a human being to behave, and he got his physiological comeuppance in the process. Not a nice story. Well, okay. What's my take on all of this? Well, first of all, let me say that as I reflected on this, it occurred to me that people who defend Henry or those who reject the quality of his reign tend to be from different schools of thought. Those who defend him, I suppose, are apt to be more traditionalist, royalists, or the kind of people that use phrases like punching above our weight, and they're defenders of empire and the good old days, perhaps. Whereas the real opponents might be more woke. There might be feminists, civil libertarians. So a judgment about Henry does reflect very much the worldviews of the people who are making the judgment. So what that says is that any of us who are making a judgment about whether Henry was a good king have to come to grips with the question of how they decide what a good king is. And my view is that a king should be there to serve the nation, to be a servant to the nation, to build the nation. And that really means that he must operate, to the extent that it's logistically possible, with the consent of the governed. Henry clearly did not. Henry was there for Henry and for continuing his line through the generations. That's really not a very pleasant judgment on my part, but that's how I come out. So there it is. Like it or not, once again, perhaps from the standpoint of some of you, a controversial and even unpleasant view, but that's it. Okay, well, either way, give me a like, subscribe, hit the notification button, and I'll see you at the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.